Everyone. My name is Lynn Lagore, and I work in central Mozambique with an organization called SAM Ministries. And part of our work is we run a primary school and sponsorship program for students who go on to high school in external schools. And I just wanted to talk to you briefly today about our library project and some of the books that we're developing specifically for children to use here in central Mozambique. And I have to give you a bit of a background so that you can appreciate why we can't just go out and buy any books that are in Portuguese. Say Portuguese is the official language. Mozambique has over 40 local dialects, which are the African Bantu languages, each of them differing from each other enough that they are considered to be entirely separate languages. Where we are right here, we're at the confluence of 5 different local dialects. And like I say, the official language is Portuguese, so although we can depend on some Portuguese materials in our school, and the government curriculum is in Portuguese, it isn't the children's first language. So when they start school, they are learning Portuguese at the same time. The literacy rate in rural areas is quite poor. I would say that among the women, it's maybe 40% at best. Among the men is maybe 60%. So for our children in school, most of their parents are semi-literate at best, if not illiterate. Also in this context, the people are very poor. They live in stick huts or mud huts. They sleep on grass mats on the floor. They have very crude cooking utensils. They cook outside under a thatched shelter. So, as you can imagine, their environments are very print poor. When our kids first start school, they speak local dialect but really don't know Portuguese, and so they're plunged into a Portuguese learning environment fairly quickly from grade 1. And so one of our goals has been to teach them the alphabet in their local dialect. So we've developed an alphabet chart in the local dialect that teaches them the sounds that each letter makes, and by showing them an object from the local context. So in Canada it might be A is for apple, and here it'll be A is for umbrella, which is a dialect word for umbrella, very similar to the English word. So that's the first step in our literacy project, and is also an important link in our library program. From there we teach, of course, the syllables, and from then on, and we try to keep everything that we teach the kids and all the books that we translate or that we can get our hands on as close to what they can relate to in the local context as possible. So to bring in a book from Brazil, which is also a Portuguese-speaking country, that has pictures of city scenes or a bathroom with a flush toilet and running water, which these people don't have, they pump their own water. A book that shows a dentist office scene, ice cream cones, lollipops, a lot of those sorts of things, the kids here cannot relate to at all. So our priority is to use stories and pictures that when they look at, they can relate to. So they can relate to the animals that they see out here in the bush. They can relate to clay pots, cooking on an open fire, and all these different kinds of local context things. So the way we're making library books for these children in the local context is to produce them in their home language. And so if we have to write our own stories, so we have a few sources of stories. The one is to write our own stories, and that is to get the local people to write some of their traditional stories. Then we make sure that it's in the local dialect. We illustrate it. Anyone who can draw cartoon figures or whatever, we try to illustrate it to the best of our ability. And once we've got that, then we place these sheets in plastic covers, and I'll show you some of the books so you can see. And that's to protect the books against dust, against the rain, because those are a big problem when you live off in the middle of the African bush like this. So the books that we're producing for the lower grades, for the kids who are just learning to read, the priority is to have them in dialect, context relevant, so that they can relate to what they're reading. So they might be reading a story about carrying water from the well, or children who were playing by the river, or the little girl who was helping her mom to build a fire, or the little boy who was fixing a bicycle tire for his dad's bike. At this point, we have several levels of reading materials. We have some that are just single page stories, and it's just, it'll be about animals. We have some basic readers in Portuguese. We have basic readers that we're developing still in dialect. We also cooperate with people in South Africa who have produced books for primary schools. And we take those, often they're in English, we will translate them into Portuguese, and we translate them into dialect. And then we paste the new words into the book and photocopy the page with the new language, and then we put these into the plastic covers. So these are for the lower grades, for those who are still building their reading skills. Once kids reach 5th and 6th grade, when they're stronger readers, they can begin to read books that can be commercially bought here. So Portuguese books, either from Portugal, they can also be from Brazil. Again, context is still a bit of an issue, though not as much, because once kids hit grade 5 and 6, through the school curriculum, they become a little more aware of the world out there, and they become a little more mobile, so a little more exposed to, say, city life. They've maybe been to the city a couple times. They've maybe been into a building that has a flush toilet and running water. So the stories aren't so strange. So as you can imagine, it's quite a bit of work to produce our own materials that are very specific to our unique setting. I work with, of course, the local people. We have staff here who can translate the books. We work basically with 3 dialects. We work with one that's called Chitewe or Chute. We have Sena, Badawe, just to mention the most common ones that we have, as well as Portuguese. And so when we get a story, I begin work with these guys who we've got at the base here, and we start translating the books into whatever language that we need. Chitewe is the most common, so that's our first goal, is to translate to Chitewe. One of our desires, of course, is to increase the adult literacy rate. As you can imagine, parents who can read can help their children much better reading at home. And so one of the aspects of increasing the literacy rate and reading skill of our school children is to increase the adult literacy rate as well. So we run adult literacy classes for men and for women as well, and use basically the same materials, the same dialect alphabet and some of the same beginning readers for the adults. So that kind of wraps up what we do here. We hope that you find it interesting and helpful in some way. Thank you.